Welcome to the Autoimmune Campfire.
Join us, coaches Helen and Nona, for honest, heartfelt conversations around living well with a chronic condition.
Come sit at our campfire. There's a chair waiting for you. Hello, Helen. How are you?
Hey, Nona, I'm good, thanks. How are you today?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. So, we're talking right after the holiday, the Thanksgiving holiday, and I'm wondering, how was your holiday?
Yes. So my holiday was lovely, packed, lots of exciting stuff. I cooked for Thanksgiving, and then we dropped our daughter off to fly for a mini term to Senegal. So, and then last night we watched the Eagles Ravens game with our son's girlfriend's family. So it was literally packed the whole weekend. So it was really good stuff and filling, and I'm tired. I'm really tired. So how about you? Because I know that you had lots of different things going on this weekend too.
Yeah, we did too. Clara was in and out and here and there, and we had dinner with neighbors, and then we also had dinner with Clara's boyfriend's family, and it was all just super duper lovely. And then yesterday, Eric flew off to Italy, and Clara went back to school. So here I am with you, ready to talk about choosing well-being. You know, I
Oh,
worked that in.
yes, I love how you work that in. So choosing well-being. So one of the things that we're talking about today is a really great theory of well-being and how we could actually apply that, because we can do all the things that we've been talking about, right? The sleep and the nourishment and the connection, all the things that we have on the top of our list of things that can help us. And sometimes it may help and sometimes it may not. And that's really hard.
I have to say, like, this episode and this topic in particular is probably one of the things that I personally can struggle with mightily. This idea that we've been taught many, many times in our culture that we have the power and to shift outcomes no matter what, right? Like, well, if only you would do this, then you would be better. If only you would do that, then you'd be healthy, then you'd never get a relapse, all that kind of stuff. And we talked about this at the beginning. You and I had talked about this at the beginning of doing this. And I'm actually really glad we're talking about it now. And I'll just full disclosure. So I had a new lesion on my MRI, and so this topic comes up for me personally a lot, like reckoning with the idea that I can do all the wonderful things and I still can't control if my symptoms are worse or if I get a new lesion or if any of that happens, I'm not in control of it. And honestly, I kind of believe I'm in control of it. And and so I'm often surprised and hurt when something goes awry, then I'm like, "But wait, I did all the right things." Or worse, I wonder and I kinda gaslight myself, like, "Oh, maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe I'm doing it wrong." And so this topic of talking about what do we know about well-being even in the face of these kinds of situations which are gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah, because life is lifey, right? We think that we have control, and actually we have far less than we do. And you add an autoimmune condition in the mix, and it can drive you bonkers trying to figure out, wait, was it because I ate this, or was it because I overdid that walk, or was it because, and you will never know. So it's really, I think the thing that's helped me with leaning into well-being from the perspective we're going to talk about today is that here's what I can do with intention, right? Because I think, when we were talking and preparing for this, I said having an autoimmune condition is like it's like vulnerability on steroids, right? There's uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure at every turn, and that's the, Brené Brown's definition of vulnerability is when there's uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And I feel like that's what we live with autoimmune conditions, like literally and figuratively. We're on steroids, right? It's insane. And so the question is, well, then, so what is possible for us,
Right. No matter what. No
no
matter
matter
what's
what?
happening. Like, we tend to
Yes,
think of well-being as being like, "I'm getting my sleep, I'm eating well, I'm feeling good, I'm doing the exercise, I've got connection." Like, I'm doing all the right things. But there are times when doing all of those things are not going to leave you feeling like you have well-being because of progression, because of life, because of flares, because of all these different things. So how do you and I and Helen, how do we all have agency in our well-being, even if our bodies are not cooperating?
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. And the idea behind this field of research that this comes from positive psychology, and Martin Seligman is the person who is considered, the father of positive psychology. And he wrote this in the book. If you're in it, you'll see it flourish. A visionary new understanding of happiness and well-being. This was 2011, and this is when I just had we did our coach training in 2009, finished in 2010, and this came out right after that. And I got really, I did some positive psychology training right after that. And basically, the idea is that if we're going to flourish, we need to sort of like having our well-being tips us towards a life of flourishing, and that this we can have that despite having an autoimmune disease, right? And so this was the work of many, many positive psychologists, all sort of culminated into one theory. But the theory is called PERMA. That's the acronym. And so it stands for P is positive emotion, E is engagement, R is relationship to others, M is meaning, and A is accomplishment, achievement. And so the idea is, if you have something, everybody's PERMA will look a little different because we're all different, and it'll change across the course of our lives. But the idea is it's important to have something in each of those buckets that feed our well-being. And so this is a model. I love that when we were talking and preparing for this, you're like, well, this is the model for the best and the worst of our lives, right? This is a model that can carry us, whether we're sort of, really feeling rock bottom, or whether we're actually feeling good and wanting to maintain it. But one of the things that Martin Seligman said is this is available to us no matter what. And so that it made it sort of an equal opportunities for well-being, meaning that we can flourish wherever we are. So we had a really great chat about, how does this show up in our lives? And so I'm curious, Nona, when you think about PERMA, what is it? How does it show up for you? Or what would you say about your relationship to well-being?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when we first moved to Italy, this was in 2007, 2006, like, it was a long time ago. Um, I was super devastated about the move. I know you guys I know, just hold your tongue, everybody. So, I was devastated by this move. I was so depressed and anxious, and it was just super hard, and that was really the first time that I turned to a gratitude practice. And I will say, my gratitude practice has sustained me through so many big life changes. And that is something I come back to time and again. And of course, it's a feature of positive psychology. And in my classes at Harvard, where we were talking about positive psychology, we actually did a whole thing about gratitude. And so, learning about different types of gratitude, I use different ways of keeping a gratitude journal so it doesn't get
Mm,
stale.
Mhm,
right? Because
mhm,
it can happen. So, I would say that's a really big deal for me is that I also, because I know you don't know this about me, but I can be very judgmental, and, my husband is a fantastic human being, and my judgment can be very helpful. Whose
mhm.
can't, right? But I work to actually give him positive feedback every day. And I have found like I notice like things that I would normally have been like, well, you should do it like this. You should do that. Right. I mean, I hate to even say that about myself, but hopefully Clara is listening. Clara, yes, I'm sorry. I'm saying this about your dad. So but I have found that I have less criticism because I have practiced with looking for ways to appreciate him on a daily basis. So I think that fits a lot of different that ticks some perma boxes for sure. Um, and then I also engagement with art, writing, this work. Like, I feel like I really focus on this because, like the pleasure episode, I am all about, like, well-being, PERMA, that's gonna help me feel good today, and that's what I'm all about, for sure, 100%. That's what I would say. How about you, Helen? Tell me about your PERMA practices.
So this is I love a good structure, and I love a good invitation to, okay, so how can I add this in? And so positive emotion for me um, is really expanded over time. My top value is love and love of learning. So I can totally get into a book and go into flow or, drawing or any of these things. That's engagement, that sort of sense of flow where you lose track of time. So I love that. But I also gratitude is really important too, but what I love is that love where I can be a loving presence for somebody else or for myself, right? How do I show myself love? The I when I'm feeling really challenged, often I lean into awe, which is a really wonderful positive emotion, and that I can really access through nature. So I'll look at the sky, or I'll see a sunset or a sunrise, or see, like a little ladybug walking around, or any of those things. It's just so. It just really inspires, or I'm at the beach. That really inspires my awe. So so positive emotions I love, or I love even the gentlest of positive emotions, like contentment. I really love that sense of contentment, that sort of so there are all sorts of different positive emotions that I enjoy and really notice instead of just like, "Oh, that was nice." You know? Like, really, like, ooh, really notice it and sort of, put a star there. So engagement, as I said, love to read, I love to walk in nature. Lots of, sort of really where you lose track of time is where that flow happens. Relationship to others, we talked about this last time in the connection episode. These mutual relationships that sort of feed our souls and feed our hearts. I absolutely love those. And so, meaning and purpose, gosh, this podcast, meeting with you, trying to, talk about vulnerability, that this is us being vulnerable in service of being brave and putting something out that may be of service to others. I think about my coaching work in general feels very deeply meaningful. I'm sure you can relate to that. And then accomplishment. Sometimes, I do think, I think growing up, it was all about the next thing, the next degree, the next achievement, the next whatever. I think we are in a culture that very much recognizes, in inverted commas, successes. But I think accomplishments can be as simple as, wow, that was a really lovely Thanksgiving dinner. Accomplished, mission accomplished, or it could be, oh, I'm about to renew my PCC certification. Then that would be another accomplishment. But I do think in this culture, there's a lot of focus on that A of accomplishment. And I think that's the one that really got dinged when I got when I started to become sick, because it's as if the A wasn't possible for me for a while. And so, it really sort of tipped the balance of my well-being a little bit. And so
Can I wanna interrupt you and just ask you say something about that because I think that's really a good that's really important to recognize that the A
Mhm.
might change.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I often say to people is like, your benchmarks don't have to be what society expects. And when you have an autoimmune
Mhm.
condition, they have to change. So I would
Mhm.
say, like, right, like
Mhm.
getting up and walking to the end of the driveway may have been an A. And of course, that's frustrating. Right? If when you're dealing with something like that, but still, I just wanted to throw that in there and just say, how did A change for you? Because you're saying, like, A wasn't available, but is that really true? Like, how was it available?
Your body is whispering secrets to you about the life you're here to live. Decode the messages about the joy you're meant to experience despite, or maybe because of, the condition that upended everything you thought you knew. If you're ready to make magic and meaning of your one wild and precious life, learn more about coaching with Nona at nonajordan.com. Yeah, yeah. I think that I was so invested in that A that I didn't realize that the other small things, like, cooking Thanksgiving dinner was just, it probably didn't even pop up on my registry before. But now I realize how much effort and work goes into that. I'm checking that A box. So, and I think that the idea is that as long as you have something in each of these buckets, but if a bucket is empty, then your well-being is challenged. So it's about being really intentional about, okay, well, so in some things I could say there was, you know, I don't know, at Peeling Leadership where I work, we talk about these 5-star PERMA activities, right? So it's almost like I could almost say Thanksgiving, positive emotion. It was really joyful to be around our family and engagement. I mean, once I get into a sort of cooking vibe and I'm in the flow, right? Relationship to others, there was so much of a relationship bucket there, meaning it felt really meaningful to be able to connect together. And then a accomplishment did it. So that was like a 5-star activity. So I think it's about really noticing that versus just not noticing and it being just something in the background. It's almost like I bring it in here and go, wow, that really fueled my well-being.
Yeah. I would also say too, like, for the type A people, it just occurred to me when you were talking about that, like, for those type A people who now have an autoimmune condition, I think an achievement can also be not doing.
Yes. Oh, can you take us back to, I know you can do more, but can
Can
you
you
do
do less?
less?
Like, I was thinking it is such an I love that I didn't cook Thanksgiving and I still had a lot of, meaningful connection and positive, like, a lot of that, and, I didn't burn my energy out cooking a meal that I wouldn't want to have cooked. So, you know, I just wanna presence that for people who
Yes.
are like, achievement." I'm like, "You know what? Sometimes achievement is saying no and setting boundaries and doing less."
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And we get to define our accomplishments.
Yes.
Whereas I think when culture defines it, all of a sudden, I feel like in our culture, it's like, gotta be happy and gotta get things done. And what about the bits in the middle? Those are the things that I think often the E, R, and M get squished.
I think one of the things too that you were talking about that I just wanted, we talked about this when we were talking about this episode, but I think too, sometimes when we are people who have autoimmune conditions or just get diagnosed, like having somebody say, you need to have positive emotions. Like, can you talk a little bit about toxic positivity and how this differs from that?
Yes. Yeah. So toxic positivity is really about positive over everything versus the real emotional continuum. What I love in my sort of research and reading is Brene Brown's work when she talks about emotions. And she talks about, if you numb the feelings you don't want to feel, you cannot selectively numb emotions. You numb the whole mix. And that is just such a huge thing. There are things that we don't want to feel that are hard, like grief and sadness and betrayal, all sorts of emotions that I think come with some of these diagnoses. And they're like, just keep going. I just keeps that smile on your face. And sometimes you don't feel like smiling. And so, what I want to say is, we need to acknowledge all of the feelings we're feeling, because I really actually don't like positive emotions and negative emotions, because I don't really, I think they're all emotions, they're all messengers, that all have a little whisper for us. Like Susan David says, emotions are data, not directives. What's the data and the emotion? And they're all welcome. That's how I feel about it. So we're not trying to slap on and say, only feel the good things. No, feel them all. Because if we don't, they just land as more tension in our body, is my personal experience. But what would you say, Nona, about toxic positivity?
Well, I'm totally in full agreement with everything you said, but, one of the things that and I historically have really struggled with feeling. It has really been a whole like, a lifetime sort of experience for me to be okay with feeling things, um, because I grew up in a family where that was not allowed. The feelings
Oh,
were
yeah,
not
me
allowed.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah,
don't do
and
that.
so it's like learning how to feel, like, what am I feeling? I'm over here like eating the ice cream and I'm like, but wait, am I having feelings about something? I might be having a feeling, like just completely dissociated from it. So it's really been a process for me. But one of the things that I've noticed is that when I'm able to really stay with those difficult emotions and be with myself, this is going to seem really, I don't know if it'll seem odd or not, but there is some really deep joy in feeling those feelings all the way through, because you know what? If we're grieving, that means we're loving. If we're, if we're angry, that means we care. Like, there's so much there for us. And so if we can really get all the way through it, there is this is how we know we're alive, you
Yes.
know?
Oh gosh, yeah. And I love how you sort of named those little messages, right? If there's anger, well, like what is the anger whispering to you? What is that about? And I do think, I feel like in coach training they talked about emotions come and go, and they, can be almost like a labor pain in 60 to 90 seconds. So you can always opt to stop if it feels too intense, to come back out of it. But that actually, when you feel through it, then you get that richness of it, which is what you're talking about, in the joy of it.
And you're able to get the wisdom. If you're pushing it away, then you don't get the information.
Yeah, and I do think that when I have had people come, I would say, come at me almost with positive psychology, I felt so unseen. It's felt very lonely. It's as if you're not acknowledged, or anything, that the experience that you're having. And so, and I know that I've done that. It's culturally how we grew up, right? Just keep smiling, and especially as women, I would say. And now I'm really hoping that I hold space with empathy for people to have the emotions they're having, because it's really important. I mean, there's, stuffing them down is not helpful.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that was one of the things when I was taking a course on resilience, which was all about positive psychology at Harvard. That was one of the things that our professor, like, she opened with that. She was like, that may have been positive psychology 1.0, but we now know and recognize and acknowledge that we have to be present and engaged with what is, because that actually helps us move through to the positive emotions.
Yeah, and I do think there's both and. Except, like, I, dropping off our daughter at JFK, there was this intense sort of, I would almost say fear. What's she going into? Is she going to be okay? And then this incredible pride
Yeah.
that she was being brave in service of
Oh.
growing herself, right? So it's like we often think it's, oh, it's this or this, but you can feel multiple things at the same time. And it's just about how do I really get granular about understanding what each one is and even naming each one for me in service of my well-being.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Well, should we dive into our takeaways?
Yes, why not?
Why not? Why not?
Well, so we've been focusing on, as we said coming in, all the empowered choices you can make, right? Sleep, connection, pleasure, all the things, nourishment. And these things do feed in and fuel perma and well-being, right? But what we love about this theory is that no matter what, no matter if we're in the darkest flare or we're feeling actually pretty good, PERMA is available to us, right? If we focus on it with intention. So it really is a gift. And I will put some resources in the show notes for any of you who want to dive a little bit deeper. But it is just, what if you were able to say, okay, well, so if my well being feels a little funky, what do I want to put in one of those buckets? Is there a bucket that's empty? Do I want to just kind of shift some energy there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then we just touched on this, but it's worth saying again that this is not about toxic positivity, right? In fact, I would say when you were talking about the vulnerability, this is a place that can be very vulnerable for people, right? To say to another person, I'm sad or I am afraid or right, like there's so much vulnerability and for good reason because just like Helen said, like, I too have been like, well, why do you feel like that? Why don't you do a gratitude practice? What's wrong? You know what I mean? Like, why aren't you just grateful? You just got your leg chopped off. Well, you have another one, don't you? Right. I think- you know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about that for sure. That positive psychology is really includes being present with what is and the recognition that we don't want people to feel alone. Like Helen was saying, you've felt totally unseen. So have I. It's awful. It's terrible to feel like that. And it requires incredible vulnerability to share that and to not kind of live in toxic positivity in our culture. So that's not what we're talking about though. So that's our second takeaway that it's okay, like pick your people, but definitely like be courageous and vulnerable so you can get to true positive emotion.
Love it. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And then the third one is it's not a one and done. Darn it, right? Don't we, I know that, no, you don't like hack culture. It's not like a hack and then that's it. Sometimes our perma buckets will change, right? We might need to move everything into like one side. Maybe, an elderly relative gets sick and all of a sudden, our how we're spending our units of energy moves. However, being aware of where we're putting our energy and where we're putting our intention helps us to continue to sort of move it back when we've had like a big ask of us, or really be intentional about where we're investing, or, what are the positive emotions I like to feel, right? And just maybe then it's like, oh, well, then I'm going to pick a novel. Let me pick that. Is that, are those the positive emotions that are sort of in that novel? How do I pick that? What's values aligned for me? So it's, because one of the things that has been woven through this series is our values and what we value as well. And so knowing and understanding our values really helps infuse that well-being, which then tips us towards flourishing. So being intentional is not one and done. Continue to learn about yourself. Run the experiment, as Nona would say. And we'd love to hear in the show notes what resonates for you and what experiments you're running and what you're finding out about your own well being.
Well, thank you all for being here, Helen. Thank you for walking us through that. It was fantastic. And thank you for being here to all of our listeners. We are looking forward to seeing you we have 2 more episodes in this season. Next time we're going to be talking, it's going to be maybe a shorter episode, but what happens when you're in a flare? Like, it's like it's the emergency episode. And then we're gonna have a double date with our husbands and talk about husbands and autoimmune conditions and diagnoses and their perspective. So thank you. Thank you all for being here, Helen. It was so good to see you. I'm sending all of you love. Mwah.
Yeah. Mwah. Sending you all love and thank you so much for listening. And if you are listening and want to give us a rating, we would love that. We would love to hear from you in the comments. And if not, we'll see you for next episode of when we hit the bumps in the road.
or the bumps hit us.
The bumps that hit us. Yes.
Yeah.
All of the above.
Did you enjoy this campfire conversation? Please rate our podcast wherever you're listening to light the way for others to find the Autoimmune Campfire. The information provided on the Autoimmune Campfire is for educational or informational purposes only. It is not intended nor implied as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always, always consult your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you might have regarding a medical condition or treatment plan. The Autoimmune Campfire does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on this site or podcast. Recording and editing wizardry by Make Your Day Richer. Thanks for joining Helen and I around the campfire.